What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Babel on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Nun Gimel. Nun Gimel? Yeah, sure. Daf Nun Gimel of Masechta Pesachim. Some of the inyanim we will discuss today. The last places to eat fruit during Shemitah. Did we start talking about that yesterday? Yeah, we did. Yeah, of course we did. Yeah, so we started talking about it yesterday. We're going to talk about it a little bit more today. Roasting meat on Pesach night. That's an interesting thing. Maybe people here have heard about it. Like the question of, can you say on Erev Pesach, like, oh, I'm going to buy this meat for Pesach? Well, if ever you heard about it and you weren't sure what it is, what it's all about, that's on today's daf. And then just kind of in passing, we discussed like a menachos, like korban mincha, bringing from barley a little bit. And then making a bracha on fire, like borei me'orei ha'esh, on Motzei Shabbos and possibly Motzei Yom Kippur. Now that I've whet your appetites, let's go weiter. We're on Daf Nun Gimel, the Aleph, 2, 4, 6, 7 lines into the page. Taner Rabbanon, the rabbis taught. Ochlin ba'anovim ad sheichlu dalios shel ochel. Okay, you can eat. What was I talking about a minute ago? Was I talking about eat? Yeah, of course, because I was reading it out of my notebook, so I must have written it right. Yeah, so we're talking about eating the fruits of. Yeah, Shemitah, exactly. Right, that during a Shemitah year, as we discussed yesterday, so as long as there's still fruits in the field for the undomesticated animals to consume, so you can feed the animals that are domesticated, that you're taking care of, from your own private stash. So now we're saying that Ochlim ba'anovim, so you can continue eating your grapes. Achichlu dlios shel ochel. So ochel does not mean food here. Ochel means the name of a place that's called Ochel. I don't know, anybody ever heard of this place? I haven't. Anyways, but you can continue eating grapes until what are dlios? The vine arbors. Vine arbors are like, I don't know, canopies of sorts that have like grapevines growing on them. So once the vine arbors of Ochel, this place called Ochel, no longer have any grapes, well, at that point, you gotta empty out your private stashes and make them hefker, ownerless. And then the Brisa says, but by the way, if this place called Ochel is not the final place to run out of grapes, maybe there's some other place that still has some publicly available grapes, well then rely upon those. This isn't a hard, fast rule that there's something special about Ochel. Just generally speaking, this place called Ochel would be the last to run out of grapes. But if there's some other place that is last, you can rely upon that. Ochlim bezeisim, you can continue eating your private stash of olives until there are no longer any olives available in Tekoa. Now, if you remember Daf Kuf Mem Zayin of Masechta Shabbos, our friend Rabbi Yisrael pointed out that this Tekoa is a reference not to where he lives in Tekoa, but to a place in the north called Tekoa. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Ad Sheichla Achron Shel Gush Chalav. Rabbi Eliezer says it's until the olives run out in a place called Gush Chalav. And what we're talking about is that once there are no longer any olives, that if a poor person were to be searching for olives, he would be unable to find any olives, not on the sort of branches of the trees and not on the trunk of the tree. There would not be any olives available. Rova. It's there's something about this word rova that it just like doesn't fit in. Each time I read this, I keep on like forgetting to read the word rova and like, oh right, that's like part of the phrase. But anyways, rova just is like a measurement of how much olives need to be available. Okay. Ochlin begrogris achichlu page beishini. You can continue eating your own private stash of figs until they run out of figs in beishini. Rabbi Yehuda lohusku page beishini elinian meiser. Rabbi Yehuda says, wait, hold up. Beishini is not in the context of Shemitah. It is only in the context of meiser, these figs from Beis Hini. As we see, Page Beis Hine ve'ahini de tovina chayavin b'meiser, that the figs of Beis Hine, and interestingly, ahine The figs of Beis Hine and the Hine, which are dates, the Tuvina. Okay, so the figs of Beis Hine and the dates of Tuvina chayavim b'maiser. You have to separate meiser from them. Okay, fine. So Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is that page Beis Hine have nothing to do with Shemitah. As we learned yesterday, you can continue eating dates until there are no longer any in Soar. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Omer says, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Ochlin al shel bein hakifin vein ochlin al shel bein hashitzin. That when we're talking about dates, you can continue eating the dates in your private stash as long as there are still dates in the branches of the tree where animals can access. But if there are dates in the thorns of the tree, but none in the branches, well, that doesn't count as dates being available since animals can't get them. Very many. But we have a question. So we just gave a whole list of, criteria. I don't know if that's the word, but a whole bunch, like a whole list of different fruits and when the last time you can eat your private stash is, right? When you run out of this in this place, when you run out of that in that place. But we have a totally different approach in the following brisa. Ochlin ba'anovim ada Pesach. That actually, forget about the vine arbors of this place called Ochel. That's irrelevant. You're allowed to eat grapes until Pesach. B'zeisim ada atzeres. You can eat olives until Shavuos. B'grogris ada Chanukah. B'tamarim ada Purim. You can eat figs until Hanukkah. You can eat dates until Purim. So these are pretty clear definitions of when you can eat your own private stashes, and it's not based on, how many, these grapevines are in a place called Ochel. No, it has to do with if it's Pesach or, olives until Shavuos, etc. So which one is it? So Vamar Bevai, and says Rebevai, so continues the question. Rabbi Yochanan Tati Basaysa Machlif, Seder, technicality. Rabbi Yochanan actually switches the last two around, so we'll say that figs are until Purim and dates are until Hanukkah, whatever it might be. But the point is that the second brisa is determining the zman bi'ur, when you have to get rid of your private stash, based on time of year, like holidays of the year, not based on technical indications of particular places. So the Gemara answers idi v'idi chatshirahu. They're the same thing, meaning the time that the grape arbors of Ochel are going to run out of grapes is the same time is Pesach time, right? And the same thing for the other shiurim. V'ibay same, or if you want, I could say hakatani behedra im yesh mucharos ben ochlin alein. That in the first brisa, when it was mentioning, let's say the trellises, specifically the trellises, the what's it called, the vine arbors of Ochel, it also said, but by the way, if you find others that still have grapes, well then you can rely upon those. Whereas the second brisa, which says Pesach, it's a low plug. There's no, but if you still find grapes, no, that's a hard stop, right? So you have two ways of understanding. Either both brisas are really saying the same thing, just one's putting them in the context of, if you could still find olives in this particular place. The other one's saying, look, at the end of the day, this aligns with Pesach, Shavuos, Chanukah, Purim. But the other way to understand it is actually they're saying two different things, which is, whereas in the first brisa, they're sort of general ideas, but if you still find some other fruits available, then you could rely upon those to say that they're still available and I can eat my own private stash. Whereas the second brisa is saying, look, comes Pesach time, no more grapes. Comes Shavuos, no more olives, etc. Okay, fine. Meaning, I think that in both cases they're not necessarily arguing, right? The point is that just according to the first way of answering, they're both saying the same thing, whereas according to the second one, the first one's giving you sort of more of a general guideline, but it's not a hard, fast rule, whereas the second brisa is saying, look, Pesach is a final cutoff. There's no eating grapes after Pesach. Tanya, we learn in brisa, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Omer says, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, the son of Rabbi Gamliel, the father of Rebbe, Simin Laharim Milin, that the sign for mountains is milin. Milins are gallnut trees. What in the world are gallnuts? Am I supposed to know what a gallnut is? I don't know. Similar makom to call him. A sign for valleys is palm trees. Similar nechalim kanim. The sign for canyons, I guess, is reeds. Similar shvela shikma. The a sign for plains, for flat plains, are sycamore trees. All right. And even though I can't prove this to you that the sign for plains are sycamore trees, I can kind of make a cute little illusion. Shneimar, the pasuk says, that King Solomon made all of the silver in Jerusalem ka'avanim, like stones. They were just like available in the streets, and he made them to statues and stuff. V'sa'arazim, well, I don't know, statues, maybe sculptures, maybe ich weiß nicht. But he like made these like big silver displays in the streets. V'sa'arazim nasan kishikmi mashabashvele larov, and the cedars he made like sycamore that are in the open plains, i.e., that there were so many of them. So we see that that there are lots of sycamore trees on the open plains. Now, what's the point of what we just said? Like, it's considered a mountain if there are walnut trees. Okay, Mazel Tov. Like, why is that important? And let's say I see a mountain without sycamore trees. It's not a mountain. Like, who cares? So there's nafkaminas. So similar milin, similar makom dekalim. When we say that a mountain is defined by something that has, essentially, I guess, a mountain that has walnut trees, and a valley is defined as a valley with date palms. Nafkamina lebikurim. Okay, so there's an nafkamina actually when it comes to bikurim. Ditnan, as we learned in the Mishnah, mevim bikurim ela mishiva saminin. That bikurim is specifically brought to Jerusalem from the 7 species of Eretz Yisrael. Right? Who can tell me what they are? Write it to us on WhatsApp. Now here's the important part. However, we do not bring bikurim from palm trees in mountains and not from fruits in the valleys. Right? Meaning, we only want you to bring bikurim from like good geshmaka, awesome stuff. But date palms in mountains, that's not going to be the good stuff, right? Date palms in valleys, that's going to be the good stuff, as we said, right? A sign for a valley is a place that has date palms. But if you have date palms in the mountains, don't bring those as bikurim. That's not what we're talking about. It's not what we're interested in. And the same thing applies to the peiros sheba'amakim, the fruits in the valleys, right? Now, specifically when it comes to grain, when it comes to like wheat or something, apparently, you don't want to be planting those in the valley. You want to be planting those, I guess it's, wait, where am I? And you also don't want to bring, so like the wheat stuff, you're not going to bring, wait, where am I? Exactly. But we didn't say, okay, that's fine. Anyways, sorry. So we have a Mishnah that says, right, that the bikurim only comes from the Shiva Saminim, right? Now the Mishnah continues, do not bring bikurim from date palms in mountains. Now, additionally, also do not bring from like wheat that comes from the valleys, right? So now the question is, how do we define what a mountain is or a valley is in terms of bikurim to know like if I should be bringing these species from these places? So we say that, well, so we're saying don't bring dates from the mountains. Well, how do we define a mountain? A mountain is a place that has walnut trees. So if you have a mountain and it has walnut trees, then if there are date palms there, don't bring those as bikurim. Now, additionally, we said that the sign for a valley is date palms, right? So because date palms grow very well in a valley. So first of all, no, there's no first of all. But do not bring wheat from the valleys. Meaning, if you have like a valley that has date palms, so then if there's wheat growing there, that is not wheat that you're going to want to bring as bikurim. So that is the point of giving descriptors of what's considered a mountain, what's considered a valley, right? And we're going to get in a second to what's considered a nachal. Why is that important? So basically, there are places when it's important to specifically be bringing or not bringing from valleys or mountains. So these valleys and mountains are going to be defined by how we're defining them here, by a mountain being a place that has walnut trees, a valley being a place that has date palm trees. Okay. Similarly, nachalim kanim. How do we? What's a sign for a nachal? For I think it's defined as like a canyon, but we're going to see in a second. Nafkamina le nachal eson. The nafkamina is for nachal eson by egla arufa, right? So it says that, right? If you find a corpse in the middle of nowhere, we don't know who the murderer was. So what we do is we take out a calf and we bring it to a nachal eitan, to a desolate like canyon, and we like kind of kill it there. So so the definition of a nachal, of a canyon, is a place that has reeds. So if you find this desolate canyon and there's no reeds there, well, keep on looking because you need a place with reeds, because that's the definition of a canyon. The Shvela Shikma, Simon the Shvela Shikma, we say that an open plain is a place that has sycamore trees. Nafkamina lemekach memkar. The significance of that is comes to mekach memkar, for a business. I.e., if you're selling somebody a plain, well, the definition of a plain is a place that has sycamore trees. Now, so now that we've kind of gone down that route to say that the nafkamina when it comes to an open plain is regarding business, right? That if you say that you're selling an open plain to somebody, it's a place that has sycamore. Well, guess what? The same thing applies to the others as well. If you're, mentioning a mountain in the context of a business dealing, well, mountain is defined as a place that has walnut trees. If you're mentioning a valley in a business deal, well, a valley is a place that has date palms. Okay, fine. New Mishnah. Welcome. Shinagu limkor be'madaka l'nachrim mochrin. So, if you have a place where the minhag is that they sell behema daka, what's a behema daka? Behema daka is like a sheep, a goat. So if there's a place where the minhag is that they do sell goats and sheep to non-Jews, well then great, they can sell goats and sheep to non-Jews. However, if the minhag is not to sell goats and sheep to non-Jews, well, sheep, I guess, to non-Jews, then don't sell goats and sheep to non-Jews. Now, what would be the problem with that? Well, because uv'chol makom, in any place, ein mochrin len behema gasa. Well, because in any place, we do not sell a behema gasa, like a work animal. And the reason for that is that because we're concerned that, well, if you sell, let's say, an ox to a non-Jew, you might end up lending your ox to a non-Jew or renting your ox to a non-Jew. And in those cases, the ox still belongs to you. You're just lending it or renting it. And that means that if the non-Jew is going to end up working it on Shabbos, well, you're commanded to make sure that your animals rest on Shabbos. And if you lend your ox to a non-Jew and he's going to work it on Shabbos, that's a problem because that your ox needs to rest on Shabbos. So because we're concerned that you may end up lending or renting your ox to a non-Jew, you're not even allowed to sell your ox to a non-Jew. And then there are places that take it a step further and say that, well, we're not even going to sell sheep and goats to non-Jews out of concern that you might end up then selling oxen to non-Jews, which then might end up leading to renting and lending oxen to non-Jews. Okay? Now this also applies to agalim, musyachim, calves, and foals. Foals are like little young horses. Shleimin ushvurin, and this applies to whether the animals are healthy and complete or whether they are broken. The nafkamina is, right, so Rabbi Yehuda master b'shvur. Rabbi Yehuda says that you can actually use you can sell a broken, maybe it has like a broken leg or something. You could sell an animal with a broken, like let's say an ox with a broken leg or something that it can't really work. So Rabbi Yehuda says, yeah, there's no problem. You can sell that ox to a non-Jew because he's not going to be working that animal. The animal is not workable. It's got a broken limb. He's going to slaughter it. He's going to eat it. And since he's going to buy it and immediately slaughter it, nobody's going to see it and be like, wait, why does that non-Jew have Moshe's ox? I guess you're allowed to sell oxen to non-Jews. Nobody's going to see that because the ox is going to be slaughtered immediately. So Rabbi Yehuda says, look, there's no problem with selling a broken animal, a broken behema gasa to a non-Jew. Ben Beser Matir Besus. Ben Beser says you're allowed to sell horses to non-Jews because a horse, what are you going to do with a horse? You're going to ride it. Riding a horse is only a shvus. It's only also midrabanan anyways. And therefore, you're allowed to sell a horse to a non-Jew, and we're not concerned that maybe you might end up lending your horse to a non-Jew, and then you might end up riding it on Shabbos. Even if he ends up riding it on Shabbos, the worst that's going to happen is an Isra Midrabanan anyways. So Ben Beser says there's no problem selling horses to non-Jews. Makom shnagu lechol tzali be'leile Pesachim ochlin, makom shnagu shelo lechol ein ochlin. So if the minhag is that wherever you are, they do eat roasted meat on Pesach night, so then you can eat roasted meat. If the minhag where you are is not to eat roasted meat because it's similar to the korban Pesach, which was roasted, so therefore don't. So in those places, don't eat roasted meat. Okay, very cool. Okay, so now the Gemara says something very interesting. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, Asulu la'adam sheyomer basar zeh Pesach. Who? Mipnei shenir kemakdish behemto v'chol kachim b'chutz. Wow. So, says Rav Yehuda in the name of Rab, a person is not allowed to go over to an animal or to meat, whether it's alive, whether it's shechted, and say, you, my friend, are going to be for Pesach. Right? You can't go to the butcher on Erev Pesach and say, I'm going to buy this meat for Pesach. Because, why? Because it seems, that he's like setting aside an animal, and he's like eating kachim outside of the Beis HaMikdash. Obviously, there's no Beis HaMikdash now, and we don't want it to seem like he's saying, you're going to be my korban Pesach, so to speak. Amar Papa says, or Papa Davka Basar. Now this is limited to meat. Okay, this only applies to meat. Aval chite, but wheat, lo, that's okay. Deminta lepischa ka'amar, because all he's saying is I'm going to save it for Pesach, right? So if you go on Erev Pesach, you go to the store and you buy some flour, you say, hey, flour, I'm going to use you on Pesach, right? You're going to be for Pesach. So that doesn't mean that I'm going to take you and then sell you and use the money to buy korban Pesach. No, that's not what you're saying. What you're saying is that I'm going to use you to make matzahs, which is completely fine. Uvasar lo. Now the Gemara says, wait, is there really an issue with setting aside, with saying to meat, hey, you're gonna, I'm gonna eat you on Pesach? Is there anything wrong with that, really? So, but Meisve, we have a kasha. Amr Reb Yossi says, Reb Yossi. Now we learned this on the 19th page of Masechta Brachos a million years ago. I still remember where I was listening to this shir, because after I recorded the Babylon Talmud, I listened to them. So I was talking in Bangkok at the time, and I was walking down the big main road. Maybe it was even Taka Erev Shabbos. I think Taka was an Erev Shabbos, and I was trying to find food for myself to eat for Shabbos. And I think I was walking down the big road over there, listening to Babylon Talmud. So we were talking about specifically the Tanur Shel Achnai. I remember that, but that was on the same daf Yud Tes. Akoponim. So a million trillion years ago. Although I think Taka, at that time that I was in Bangkok, was when the first case that they know about, or at least at the time that they knew about, of the coronavirus had left Wuhan and went internationally. I think the first person went to Bangkok at the time that I was there at the end of January of last year, of 2020. But maybe that's changed by now. I saw that a long time ago. We have some Gemara to learn. So Amr Reb Yossi says, Reb Yossi, Tudus ish Romi inigas b'nei Romi lechol gdim kulasim b'leilei Pesachim. Very interesting. So this person named Tudus ish Romi, who's a very chashuv, a very important person in Rome, and he had the community in Rome eating gdim kulasim. What is that? We're going to learn in a little bit. We're going to learn about how to prepare the korban Pesach. And the way that you would prepare the korban Pesach is you would roast it, but you would roast the entire animal, and it would be like on a spit, and it would have its like legs tied up and the animal kind of hanging lower, and then you had like the intestines like wrapped around it. It was like a very specific way to prepare the korban Pesach, to roast the korban Pesach. And Tudus Ish Romi had the people in Rome prepare on Pesach night. Obviously it wasn't in the Beis HaMikdash, but on Pesach night he would have them prepare a goat, just like the korban Pesach, and roast it in that same manner. Now, obviously, it wasn't an actual korban Pesach because it wasn't in the Beis HaMikdash, and it wasn't being offered as a sacrifice. But they would prepare, as like a zecher, they would prepare the animal in the same way. Shalchulo, so they sent over to Tudus Ish Romi. Ilmale Tudus Ata, if not for the fact that you are such a great person, Tudus, Gazarnu alecha nidui, we would have put you in excommunication. Sha'atamacheles Yisrael kachim b'chutz, because you are feeding to the Yidden kachim outside of the Beis HaMikdash. Now, kachim salka daitich. Do you really think kachim? What do you mean? You didn't set it aside as as a korban. All you're doing is just taking some meat and roasting it. Ela ema karov la'achilas yisrael kachim b'chutz. But rather, what they're saying is that it's ki'ilu, it's close. You're making it so similar to the actual korban pesach. It's close, too close for comfort, as though you are feeding the yidden korbanos outside of the Beis Hamikdash. And what do we see from there? Mikulas in she'em mikulas lo. That specifically the issue with Tudus Yishromi was that he was doing something that was so similar to the actual korban pesach. He was having them prepare in like the same exact way. That was the problem. But as Rashi explains really beautifully, in the top line of Rashi says, "She'enu mekulas lo v'kasha l'rav v'tzakasha n'rav da'omer basar greda michlif b'pesach," who says that even just regular meat would be interchangeable with the korban pesach. That you can't even go to the butcher on Erev Pesach and say, this meat is for pesach. It has nothing to do with like gedim mikulasim. Maybe it's taka steak, whatever it might be. But anyways, still, we don't say that on Erev Pesach, because out of concern that it might be switched with the actual korban pesach. So the kasha is that the issue with Tudus Yishromi was not that he was, roasting pesach, korban pesach. The issue is that it was specifically prepared in the same way that the korban pesach was prepared, but regular old meat in the store wouldn't be a problem. So the Gemara answers, Amri, they say, Mikulas loshna amr loshna lo amr. It says, look, no, there's a difference. When it comes to Mikulas, like Tudus Yishromi, yeah, over there it doesn't matter whether you said this is going to be for Pesach, this is not going to be for Pesach. Maybe you said absolutely nothing. But it doesn't matter if you're going to prepare it in the same way that they would prepare the korban Pesach, so then it's going to be a problem. She'enu Mikulas, but if we're talking about meat that isn't prepared in the same way that the korban Pesach was prepared, so then perish in, lo perish lo, then specifically if he says this is going to be for Pesach, it's going to be a problem. But if he doesn't say it's going to be for Pesach, then it's no problem. Says the Gemara, Rav Acha masni la masnisa b'Reb Shimon. Interesting. So Rav Acha, right, we had just said that Reb Yossi said that there was this whole thing with Tudus Yishromi, that he was preparing the meat like the korban pesach was a problem. But Rav Acha, I'm not sure which Rav Acha this is, but Rav Acha says that it was actually Reb Shimon who said over this whole thing with Tudus Yishromi. Maskefler of Sheshis. Of Sheshis asakasha though. B'shlam l'man detani la Reb Yossi. I understand, according to the Man Amr, who says it's Reb Yossi who is teaching that there was a problem with what Tudus Yishromi was doing. Nicha, it makes sense. Masni Reb Shimon. But if you said it's Reb Shimon who said that brisa, minicha, is that does that make any sense? But we learned in the Mishnah in Temura. No, in Menachos. Reb Shimon Poter, Shlos Nadiv Kederech HaMisnadvim, that if you have a fellow who says that I'm going to bring a korban mincha from barley. Now here's the thing. Voluntary korban minchas are not offered from barley. They're offered from wheat. So the question is, when a person says, I'm going to offer a korban mincha of barley, what do we do? Do we say, right, that we go based on, right, tchilas diburo? Do we go based on what he said initially, right, tchilas dvarv or gemar dvarv, right? Do we go based on what he said at the beginning, which is, like, can we divide up what he said into two things, right? So he says, I'm going to bring a korban mincha from barley. So do we say, well, we go based on what he said first, which is, I'm going to bring a korban mincha, so let him bring a korban mincha, but not a barley, because that's not a thing, bring a korban mincha from wheat. Or do we say it goes based on the entire statement, based on what he said at the end of his statement, which is, I'm going to bring a korban mincha from barley, no such thing exists, so therefore he's potter, he doesn't have to bring anything at all, right? So the chachamim say that you have to bring a korban mincha, that you bring a korban mincha from wheat, because we say what he said at the end, the barley thing, forget about. Go based on what he said first, which is, I'm going to bring a korban mincha, and then cut off the rest of the sentence. So you bring a korban mincha from wheat. But Reb Shimon says, no, you go based on what he says at the end. At the end he says that, what kind of korban mincha is he bringing? From barley. Now no such thing exists. So he's not going to bring, he's potter, he's not going to bring korban mincha at all. Right? So, says the Gemara about Tanan, Reb Shimon potter, Reb Shimon says that he doesn't have to bring a korban mincha at all, in this case, because he didn't pledged to bring a korban mincha in the proper way that people pledge to bring a korban mincha, which is from wheat. He didn't do that. He pledged to do one from barley, and therefore that's not an actual thing. So therefore he doesn't have to bring any korban mincha. Amalei Ravina or Rashi. So 1 second. So now tying it back into this thing with tudus. So if when it comes to korbanos, like a korban mincha, Reb Shimon says, look, you have to pledge in the way that people generally pledge, which when it comes to mincha would be to pledge to bring a korban mincha of wheat. If he says barley, it's irrelevant. So the same thing over here. If you have this meat and you're preparing it like the korban pesach, but you never set it aside to be a korban pesach, and now that you're preparing it, you can't say, hey, you're going to be my korban pesach because it's already like being roasted. Like this isn't the way that you set aside a korban pesach, right? The way you would set aside a korban pesach is to, in advance, determine it to be your korban pesach, right? But we're saying over here, he didn't necessarily even say anything. He just took some meat and he's roasting it in the same way that they roasted the korban pesach, but he never designated it to be a korban pesach. So at that point, there's really, it's nothing, and therefore, according to Reb Shimon, there shouldn't really be a problem with what Tudus Ish Romi was doing. So therefore, Reb Shesha says it doesn't make sense to say that Bryce says Reb Shimon who said it. Rather, we're going to have to say that it's Reb Yossi. Now the Gemara asks, Amar Ravina le Rav Ashi. But now Ravina says to Rav Ashi, Umandatani la Reb Yossi minicha. And according to Mandam, who says that it's Reb Yossi saying that what Tudus Ish Romi did was a problem. Does that make it any better to say that it was Reb Yossi? But Rava said, Reb Shimon b'shitas Reb Yossi Amra. That after all, Reb Shimon, when he says by the korban mincha that when it's made from barley, it's irrelevant, he was actually, meaning when he says, I'm going to bring a korban mincha of barley, it's irrelevant, he was actually saying that based on Reb Yossi's opinion. The Amar, who says in the context of Tmura, that a person also is based on what he says at the end. Meaning, so if a person says, I'm going to bring a korban shlamim, I'm going to bring a korban ola, right? So he just said two things. He just said a shlamim and an ola. So Reb Meir over there says that it goes based on what he says first. But Reb Yossi says you have to go based on what he said second. That you have to assume that he's saying that he's going to bring both, a korban shlamim and a korban ola, and no such thing exists. And therefore, you're going to have to let it just do nothing until it gets a mum. But we see that Reb Yossi says that you go based on what a person says at the end. And that Reb Shimon, when he says that when it comes to the mincha, if he says he's going to bring a korban mincha from barley, you have to assume that he meant that he's going to bring a korban mincha from barley, and therefore he doesn't have to bring anything because that's not actually a thing. So he actually says the same thing as Reb Yossi. And if that's the case, Reb Yossi should also say that what Tudus Ish Romi was doing is not actually a problem, since he never set it aside to be a korban pesach. So now the Gemara says, so my love, we do Reb Shimon Savela Reb Yossi, that since Reb Shimon holds like Reb Yossi, that we go based on Gemar Devar of what a person says at the end, so Reb Yossi Nami Savela Reb Shimon. So Reb Yossi would also agree with what Reb Shimon is saying with regard to the korban mincha, right? That meaning, if Reb Yossi says by Timura, right, by the korban, when he says it's going to be a shlamim, it's going to be a right, Tamur is when you like switch a korban, right? So if he says, I'm going to switch this, right, this is going to be instead of a shlam or instead of an ola, right? So Yossi says that we go based on the entire statement. So the assumption is that Rabbi Yossi would say the same thing also by the mincha, which is that the mincha would be irrelevant because he said he's going to bring a mincha of barley. And if that's the case, then there shouldn't be anything wrong with what Tudus Ish Romi says. Right? So my lab, Reb Shimon Savela Reb Yossi, Reb Yossi Nami Savela Reb Shimon, so low. So the Gemara says no. Reb Shimon Savela Reb Yossi, Reb Yossi Savela Reb Shimon. No. Reb Shimon, by the korban mincha, holds like what Reb Yossi says by the Tmura, which is that you go based on a person's entire statement, the complete statement. However, Reb Yossi would not necessarily apply what he said in Tmura to the mincha, and therefore, if he says that he's going to bring a korban mincha of barley, he would still have to bring one from wheat, and therefore, when it comes to the Tudus Ish Romi with this roasted korban pesach, there still might be a concern that even though he's not the roasted korban pesach, the roasted meat on Pesach, that you're preparing in the same way that the korban pesach is prepared, we have to be concerned that even though he's not setting aside a korban pesach in the normal way that you're setting aside a korban pesach, there still might be an issue over there. Ibailu, that's the kasha. Right, and therefore it makes sense to say that the brisa is Rabbi Yossi, but according to Reb Shimon, you can argue that there might not be anything wrong with preparing meat on Erev Pesach, on Pesach night, in the same way that it was prepared as a Korban Pesach. Ibailu, they want to know, Tudus Ish Romi, who was this Tudus Ish Romi fellow? Gavarabba Hava or Bala Grofen Hava? Was he a great person? And therefore they're saying, look, if not for the fact that you're the great person, Tudus Ish Romi, if not for that, we would put you in excommunication. Or were they scared of him? Or was he like a tough guy? And they're saying, look, if not for the fact that we were so scared of you, we would excommunicate you. So Tashma, come in here. Od Zodash Tudus Ish Romi expounded the following: how come Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were willing to sacrifice their lives and jump into a fiery furnace in order to make a Kiddush Hashem? So the Gemara answers, Nasu kavachom ba'atzman mitzvardim. Well, because they made a logical argument based on the frogs during the plague of the frogs in Egypt. You have frogs who they don't have a mitzvah to make God's name holy. And yet it says about them, they're going to get into your house, they're going to go into your ovens, they're going to go into your kneading bowls. When do you have kneading bowls next to ovens? That is when the oven is warm, is hot. And yet the frogs were willing to jump into hot ovens because that's what the Eibishter wanted. So we who have a mitzvah of making God's name holy, certainly we should be willing to jump into a fiery furnace. Wow. Rabbi Yossi Bar Oven Omer says, Rabbi Yossi Mato Maloi Lekishal Tamidei Chacham Haya, that Tudus Ish Romi would provide the Tamidei Chachamim with business. Dam Rabbi Yochanan, as Rabbi Yochanan says, Kol Mato Maloi Lekis Tamidei Chachamim Zoche V'Yoshev B'Shiva Shamayla. Somebody who gives merchandise for Tamidei Chacham to do business with will sit in the Yeshiva Shamayla, in the Yeshiva in heaven. Shenemar, as the Pasuk says, Ki B'Tzel Chachma B'Tzel Kesef, that in the shade of wisdom is the shade of money, and as Rashi says, that in the area of the wise, of the Talmidei Chachamim, will sit this person who gave them benefit from his possessions. Meaning, so what's this idea of that somebody who gives merchandise to the Talmidei Chachamim? We learned about this actually in Masechta Shabbos as well, and Daf Samach Gimel, that tzedakah is good, but the best thing is to give somebody merchandise to actually go into business with. And as Rashi explains in Masechta Shabbos, that if you would give some merchandise to a Talmid Chacham and say, look, you go into business, and here's the merchandise, we'll go into business together, and we'll split the profits, right? So it's nice to give somebody money, but it's even better to actually give him a way to do business. So Tudus Ish Romi would provide the Talmidei Chachamim with a way to do business. And therefore, going back to our original question, was Tudus Ish Romi a very great person, or was he a very scary person? He was a very great person, as we see from the drasha that he had regarding Hanani, Mishael, Azariah, and also from the fact that he would provide Talmidei Chachamim with a way to make a parnasa. Says a new Mishnah, Makom Shinagu lahadlik esaner b'leilei Yom Kippurim madlikin. So in a place where the minig was that they would light candles on Yom Kippur night, meaning mistama before Yom Kippur, but there would be light in the house on Yom Kippur. Madlikin. So they would write. Then in those places they light candles on Yom Kippur night. Makom Shnagu Shlo Ladike Madlikin. Now, if the minig was that they don't light candles on Yom Kippur night, so they don't light candles on Yom Kippur night. Madlikin b'vate knesos b'vate midrashos m'vos ha'afelim v'agabe acholim, and they would light candles in the synagogue as well as in the study hall and in dark alleyways and by sick people. Okay. Now says the Gemara, Tana, it was taught by Ben Sha'amru lahadlik u'ben Sha'amru shelo lahadlik. So we said that there are some places where they would light candles on Yom Kippur night, some places they wouldn't light candles on Yom Kippur night. So Shneinu davar echad niskamru, they both had the same intention, and that intention is that on Yom Kippur you are not allowed to sleep with your wife on Yom Kippur night, and therefore the people who would leave the candles lit, their intention was, well, if the candle is lit, if the light is on, so then we won't be sleeping with each other. Whereas the other idea was that if the light is off, well, if the light is on, then maybe we'll be looking at each other and be attracted to each other and want to sleep with each other. So therefore, let's just not have any lights on and we'll just go right to sleep. Says the Gemara, Amar of Yoshua, Darish Rava, that Rava expounded, V'amar kulam tzadikim, that your nation is all righteous people. The Olam Yershu Aretz, V'gomer, they will inherit the earth. Ben sha'amu lahadik, u'ben sha'amu shelo lahadik, shneim lo niskavnu el davar echad. Whether you have the people who are saying to leave the light on Yom Kippur night, or whether to leave the light off on Yom Kippur night, they all have the same intention, the same goal, which was to make sure that they would be following halacha and not having relations with men and women on Yom Kippur night. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Did I skip? No. It says Rav Yehuda in the name of Shmuel, in mevarchen ala or el motzoi Shabbos, that we make the bracha of Bori Me'orei Ha'esh on Motzoi Shabbos, Ho Utzchilas B'Yasahu, because that's when light was created. Light was created on a Saturday night. Mistama, the first night of, I guess, Bereshis Bara Elokim Shemaim V'Saaretz. Although, when was light created? Or maybe that was that light that God hid away. I don't know. But it was created on a Saturday night, apparently. So, since light was created on a Saturday night, so we make a bracha on the light on Saturday night. Amalei Usava, a certain elder, Vitem Rabbi Barbachana, some say it was Tak Rabbi Barbachana, Yasher V'chein Amar Reb Yochanan, that's great, and so said Reb Yochanan. Okay. Ula Avarachiv Chamra, Ula was riding on a donkey, V'azav Avashakav V'azil, Ula Avarachiv Chamra V'azil, Ula was riding on a donkey, V'avashakav V'azil Rabbi Abba Mimine V'Rabbi Barbachana Mismole, and Rabbi Abba was to Ula's right, and Rabbi Barbachana was to Ula's left. Amle Rabbi Abba le'Ula. Rabbi Abba says to Ula, "V'adad amrisu mishmei Rabbi Yochanan. Is it true what you and Rabbi Barbachana said the name of Rabbi Yochanan? In mevarchen ala or el b'motzoi Shabbos ho l'schilas b'yasohu, that we only make a bracha on the light on Saturday night, since that's when light was created. Hadar ulachazab bei Rabbi Barbachana bishus." So now Ula looked at Rabbi Barbachana with a glaring stare to show that he was upset. To which Rabbi Barbachana understood that Ula was upset. Amrle, and he said to Ula, "Ana lav aha amri." I didn't say anything about this. I never said that according to Rabbi Yochanan you make a bracha on light only on Saturday night because that's when it was created. Ela aha amri. All I said was the following: the Tani Tana Kamid Rabbi Yochanan, that a certain teacher taught in front of Rabbi Yochanan. Reb Shimon ben Elazar Omer, that says Reb Shimon ben Elazar, Yom Kippurim Shchalios b'Shabbos, that if Yom Kippur falls out to be on Shabbos, even in the place where they generally would not light candles on Yom Kippur, if Yom Kippur was Shabbos, they would light candles. Shabbos, out of honor of the Shabbos. And Rabbi Yochanan responded, and he said, that the Chacham would say that it's taka not allowed, that you wouldn't light the candle before Shabbos. You would light the candle after Shabbos. To which the people hearing this understood that to mean that according to Rabbi Yochanan, you would only light candles on Motzoi Shabbos, but not necessarily on Motzoi Yom Kippur. But says Rabbi Barbachana, that's not actually what my intention was to say. Amalei Adatehei. So Ula says, okay, that's cool. Karle Rav Yosef, and Rav Yosef, when he heard this interaction between Ula and Rabbi Barbachana, that Ula just kind of gave a look to Rabbi Barbachana, and Rabbi Barbachana understood what Ula meant and was able to respond. So Rav Yosef applied the pasuk of Maimamukim Eitza B'lev Ish, that advice in the heart of a person is like deep water, V'ishtvuni Yidlena, but a person with understanding knows how to collect those waters and to draw those waters. So advice or ideas in the heart of a person are like deep water. That's like Ula, who basically just gave a look to Rabbi Barbachana, and a person with understanding is able to draw those waters. Zeh Rabbi Barbachana. That's Rabbi Barbachana, who was able to understand what Ula was trying to express by staring at him, and was able to reply. Ve'inu k'man savua. So if they don't hold that the only time that you say that you make a bracha on light is on Saturday night, but that you would also make a bracha on light on Motzai Yom Kippur, so who do they hold like? So Kiyada Amar Binyamin Bar Yefes Amar Yochanan. It's like Binyamin Bar Yefes is the name of Yochanan Mavarchan Allah, or Bein B'Motzai Shabbos Bein B'Motzai Yom Kippurim V'chein Aham Devar, that says Binyamin Bar Yefes, the name of Yochanan, that in addition to making a bracha on fire on Saturday night, you also make a bracha on fire on Motzai Yom Kippur, and that is what everybody does. Okay, fine. That was Daf Nun Gimel of Masechta Pesachim. What did we learn on Daf Nun Gimel? So at the beginning we were discussing the last places to eat fruit during Shemitah. We saw two brises, one of them that gave like, when you run out of things in this place or that place, then you had another brise that says, look, you got to make sure to eat them by Pesach, Shavuos, Purim, Hanukkah, depending on the species. We had two ways to understand the difference between the two brises. One was that they were saying the same thing. The other one was to say that these holidays are actually hard deadlines that you must finish consuming the fruits by then. We discussed roasting meat on Pesach night. You may not roast meat on Pesach night in the same manner that they roasted the Korban Pesach, which is like on a spit with like its intestines and stuff. That would be a problem. Now, even if you're not going to be roasting the Korban Pesach in that manner, you still should refrain from saying this meat is going to be for Pesach, because it could be construed as meaning this meat is going to be for a Korban Pesach, and we don't want you to say that. And we got sort of parenthetically into the question of pledging a mincha from barley. If a person says, I'm going to bring a korban mincha from barley, how do we treat that? So according to Tanakama, he says, look, there's no such thing as a korban mincha from barley, so we assume what he means is that he's going to bring a korban mincha and he should bring it from wheat. According to Reb Shimon, however, no, if he says he's going to bring a korban mincha from barley, he means he's going to bring a korban mincha from barley. Now, no such thing exists, so therefore he's patur, he doesn't have to do anything. Then we discussed making a blessing on fire. So Rav Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel that you specifically make a blessing on fire on Saturday night, because that's when it was created. According to Rabbi Yochanan, you would even make a blessing on fire on Motzei Yom Kippur as well. And that seems to be the minhag. Well, have a great day. Peace out.